Hey, good morning, everybody. Hopefully you're excited to be here. Great morning, I think, for all of us and for the city of Cleveland. I'm Jay Farner. I'm the CEO of Rock, which is the family office and really the support and tying threads organization for Dan Gilbert, as well as the CEO of Rocket Companies. So I've spent some time in Cleveland and had a great experience, but today is probably one of the most exciting days outside of that NBA championship, which is pretty good as well. But as you probably know, our mission and Dan's mission is to make sure that we're having a positive impact on the communities where we live, we work, and we play. And when I think about today and everything that we're going to be talking about, that seems to strike exactly on our mission. So we also have something called isms, if you know Dan. They're kind of our philosophies that we live by. And one of the most important is that you'll see it when you believe it. And as these gentlemen go through the plans for the riverfront, I think we'll all really start believing what the next phase of Cleveland looks like. We've had a lot of excitement here since I can remember coming down in 2006 to set up our first mortgage office and recognizing how great of a city this was. As I referenced before, the NBA championship, the work we've done at the Higbee Building and Tower City, but this certainly marks the step into a whole new transformational opportunity for us. As you probably also know, we're doing some heavy development in Detroit. We've started and are on our way to building the second largest building in the state of Michigan, the Hudson's Tower. And as Dan likes to say, we are Lake Erie-centric. So Detroit and Cleveland are places that we like to be. Two great American cities, a great DNA, smart, hardworking people, and these types of developments in these cities are long overdue. But the reason I wanted to come down here today and speak with all of you and kick this off is that projects like the Riverfront Master Plan don't just happen. They are a result of a lot of hard work, not only by our Bedrock team, who I see many of the members here today, but by so many other people that are in this room. And, you know, we have businesses now all over the world. Our StockX business has opened up many places throughout Europe in the last year or so. We have many offices throughout the United States. And so we get to see how different communities and areas operate. And what's happening in Ohio and the city of Cleveland is something very special. Between the governor and the mayor and the city council and so many other stakeholders, the way that people in Ohio are working together to create opportunity, create jobs is something that the business community is taking notice of. And so that's what makes it so exciting for me to be down here and talk about our excitement to talk about the next phase of the riverfront. So on behalf of Dan Gilbert and myself, I want to thank all of you for your partnership, your vision, your willingness to work with us, our team, as we continue to develop this plan. And with that, I will turn it over to Mayor Bibb to get the program started. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much. Today certainly is an exciting day in our great city, and I had the privilege to get an early preview of what you're going to see here this morning. And it really is exciting for a couple of reasons. You know, a couple months ago, I had the chance to welcome the EPA Administrator, Michael Regan, to Cleveland to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. And for a long time, our river has been seen as a national model for climate justice and a rebirth in this country. And today's vision you're going to see will certainly be not just a national model, but I believe a global model for how to truly create equity in terms of master planning and how to truly make sure that our waterfronts and our riverfront can be a model for the nation. So again, I'm so excited about the plan ahead, and I truly think this will be a great example of how we truly can become a 15-minute city, 18-hour city to attract best-in-class talent for the next generation of Clevelanders. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jay. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is really exciting. Before I officially begin, I just want to express my gratitude, Mr. Mayor, to your administration. You folks have been with us along the way, providing support and guidance, and every now and then developers get to veer a little bit. But city administration can sort of bring us back together, and I really, really, truly appreciate it. But there are several other people here who are civic partners who have helped us think through this, those who worked on the vision for the valley over the years, and we've sought their guidance to make sure that we're true to some of their vision. But I'm especially pleased to see some of my colleagues in the Rock family here. I mean, as Jay pointed out, I mean, we are one big family with several, if you will, relatives within them, but we're all very much focused on Dan and Jay's vision to really push our cities forward. So I see Kobe here and Nick and Government Affairs folks, Steve Ogden and several others. I also want to thank Council President Blaine Griffin for joining us, and I'd love for you to say a few things a little later on if you would. So thank you. So just over a year ago, I had the pleasure of standing before a crowd sort of like this. There's a little more virtual stuff going on then with then Mayor Frank Jackson. And at that time, we announced that we were going to forge a partnership to really think through how we could move this idea, this vision for the valley forward in some meaningful way. And we shook hands and we created an outline of a development agreement. And from that meeting, we got to work. And we got to work. The first thing we needed to do was select an architect. We needed to select a master planner. And we thought about it long and hard, and I happened to know Sir David a little bit, and I said, well, maybe Sir David would be interested in doing this. And so, of course, I was excited when he said yes. But the reason I reached out to David and team was because I wanted to present to a creative mind, one of the best creative minds in the world. And I wanted to present the concept of the vision for the valley. But I wanted to present that concept and have fresh eyes and a fresh outlook. Just review it. And I've got to tell you, I'm really, really excited by what I hope you'll be excited by what you'll see. So I will also say that I want to dispel any rumors that Dave is not here because he's at Qatar watching the Black Stars at the World Cup. He's actually totally focused here in the room and present. Leading the presentation will be Sir David, Russell Crader, and Joe Ferenzi, sitting over here, who's with Osborne Engineering, has been really critical to tying with the great work he's done in the city of Cleveland, really understanding some of the engineering challenges, if you will, in the city, and really helping us pull this all together in this vision. So, you hire an architect. I'm a developer, right? So you hire an architect, and you don't just say, hey, okay, go get them. You do is say, okay, go get them, but these are the three outcomes we must have. Advance those. So these are the three objectives. First and foremost, we want to make sure that in the context of this master planning, you're truly thinking about how to move this concept of an 18-hour city forward in the city of Cleveland, and also a 15-minute neighborhood. A 15-minute neighborhood where folk can really live, work, play, and receive most of their recreational and entertainment nourishment within 15 minutes of biking and walking. So that was number one. Secondly, we really want to pay attention to the carbon footprint of our developments. That's a prerequisite for all developers these days, and we want to make sure that this begins to set the standard. And so we said pay attention, leverage sustainable infrastructure wherever possible, and that was number two. And the third, and probably really importantly, we just want to make sure that at the end of the day, as we create this place, it's accessible to all of the region. Everyone in the city of Cleveland should be able to come down to the area and enjoy what is being created. Make sure it's accessible and has equitable opportunities for everybody. And so with that, we set David on his way. So David?
Thank you. Thank you, Kofi. And what an exciting brief to get for development of a master plan. All the right issues that are really pertinent in the 21st century and for the centuries to come. The team and I really sort of pulled up our shirt sleeves and have really been diving into the region, to the site, to the context of Cleveland, trying to learn your city and really get to understand its incredible diversity and its incredible ecology and its history, from sort of its sort of rural past to its industrial sort of heyday and to its great renaissance that it's going through now. So from that, let me have Russell start the process and take you through how we've got to the proposal, which I will then jump into later. Russell?
Thank you, David. So I'm just going to come down off the podium a bit and use this small screen to talk about this a little bit. But as Kofi pointed out, we had these objectives, and if we could go to the next slide, please. Actually, two slides. What was interesting is that when Kofi approached us, we had these objectives, and we started to really think about where we are and looked at the site and said, let's just press pause for just a second, and let's start to move out and really try to understand a little bit more about what Cleveland is, its history, understanding it is a city on the lake, and understanding that the Cuyahoga has a really large impact to the development that has occurred within Cleveland for many years. But it's really about these neighborhoods, right? We started to uncover and, for us, learn about many of the neighborhoods and how the neighborhoods all have their own identity. And the identity is such that I think if you did go to a coffee shop and you could have a 5-minute conversation with someone, you might be able to pick out where they are, what neighborhood they're coming from, based on what their likes and dislikes are. And we started to understand that, and that there's a common thread that occurs in the neighborhoods of commonality but distinction. Next slide, please. And so with that, just we've got a few images here, and I know that you all know your neighborhoods rather well, but we were starting to pull out some of the ideas of what place is and what makes place and how people interact with them and how that it varies by neighborhood. And the idea of place is not the same for each individual, nor will it ever. But there are some formalities and some informalities that make places survive and thrive better than others. The idea of nature, the idea of connection, just with gathering of people, such as what we're seeing in Edgewater or the League Park. But you're starting to see these connections and start to really think about, okay, we know we have the neighborhoods and we have the threads. How can we start to develop that further? Next slide. And so, sorry, go back one. If we start to really think about this and understand that the neighborhoods were basically developed and the idea of infrastructure of the Cuyahoga, and really start to think about that and what it means throughout the history of Cleveland, right? It started with this, we've got the beautiful little postcard on the far left, and really thinking about how nature was and nature is. And when you look at all the maps and the drawings, you kind of forget how much of topography is in all this area, right? And so you've got nature, you need to accept it, but over time, the Cuyahoga River has adapted into becoming a critical piece for infrastructure and transportation, which leads to commerce. And that relationship has moved forward and backward through time. But it was really like, say, I'm going to go to the 1920s when really the steel industry was heavy. We were starting to make more concrete and steel structures throughout the U.S. And that really started to make its mark and impact on the river's edge and moving things forward. So much so that it's almost been a hindrance now moving forward in terms of the infrastructure that's there and how to really think and grapple with it on what we can do to move forward. But I think, I leave off with these two images on the far right, which is where I think the river started to be maybe abused, right? Where the infrastructure was so heavy that it was overusing the resource. And while it was for transportation and commerce, there is a forgetfulness, I guess, about what this river can do for a means of being a place in the situation of Cleveland being on the water. And so that leaves us with that last slide where we are now starting to see this new reclamation and the kayaks and and the boardwalks. But the idea that it is a new destination, and how can we start to think about that moving forward? And Joe, I don't know if you could just jump in here.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Russell. And so to kind of build on this, next slide, please. We wanted to, this kind of identifies, the image on the left really is part of the early part of the 20th century, and most Clevelanders really can recognize this image. I mean, it just shows the industrial characteristics and nature to which the riverfront was developed. And but looking more on the other image to the right, that's the current state. And what's impressive about it is some of the transformation that's happening in the riverfront. So when you look at the Metro Parks and the Canal Basin Park that they did, and Merwin's Wharf, looking to draw people to the riverfront is really exciting. And then when you go to a near future project in what the port and their other partners are doing for Irishtown Bend, you're starting to see the transformation. And continuing upstream a little bit more, Scranton Peninsula, there's some developments that have occurred along there. And so that takes us really to where our setting and our opportunity is. And so we really have a huge opportunity here to capitalize and, again, draw people to the river. And so we're adding 3,000 feet of riverfront development, that's going to be a dedicated park space, or not dedicated, but a park space for all to enjoy. Next slide. So when you start looking at the existing site, this is our site area, and when you start looking at it, this infrastructure is a critical piece. When you look at any development of any magnitude, it's always a critical piece. But in this, something that's of this magnitude, it really is. It's the foundation of the project. And so what you want to look at is, and just make some observations. So again, you saw that industrial waterfront, and I'm going to start in this concept that's the shore to core concept of our project, and you heard some of that before. But starting at the shoreline, you have that industrial waterfront, remnants of it. You can see remnants when you go out there. Moving back up, you can see the rail yards that serviced it. And, those have been converted into parking lots, but that infrastructure still exists. Then you have the roadway, and you start to look, and that really bifurcates the site. You have Canal Road moving up, you've got Huron, and then all the way up to Prospect. So, you're seeing those divisions getting from that shore to that core area. And then you have, obviously the Tower City within the core, and then moving out to Public Square. And really the one issue with Public Square is it's a lot of congestive traffic, and it's really hard from a mobility perspective to access the square. And so when we start to turn to the design, we want to look at how can we resolve that mobility issue, but at the same time respect and understand in an equitable way, really redesigning that square so that the public transportation is also improved. And so moving. And then, lastly, as Russell mentioned before, you've got a lot of elevation challenges. You're starting out at plus 100 all the way down to plus 7, and those are elevations above the river level. So you're talking about 93 feet of elevation difference. So those are all challenges, and they set little platforms. You can see all the elevations there that mark up those little levers or levels. Next slide. So I think when we start, again, at that shore to core concept, you can see the federal channel. It is a federal channel, so we have to respect that. And then we have the bulkhead. It's still that industrial bulkhead, so we're going to look to improve that. As you make your way up onto the site on this sectional view, you come into the parking lots, and those industrial areas. Then you make your way to Canal Road, and Canal is a heavy truck traffic area, so that creates an obstacle there. As you're making your way further up, more parking lots, until you get to some of the core assets like Tower City, like some of the parking lots, those assets, and then making your way further past Prospect, and then all the way to RTA, and then kind of the rest of that core area. So that really defines the existing.
Thanks, Jeff. Next slide, please. So as we start to think about the 18-hour city and the 15-minute access, and if we could go to the next slide, and pull in a bit from what Joe just mentioned about the sort of the constraints with the infrastructure that exists now, I think we start looking at opportunities, right? And as we looked at the communities and the neighborhoods that make up Cleveland, we started to think, all right, now we're coming into looking at our site. And what are some of these assets that we can do to help develop the 18-hour, 15-minute city? Some of the key principles of the 18-hour, 15, besides the objectives we've heard today, though, is really about establishing that work-life balance, right? Trying to have a place where you can live in this 18-hour, 15-minute city, neighborhood, but also then having the ability to live and then have a career. And think about that career as not just a small career path, but the long-term career path, and start to really think about workplace environments. But to do that, you also then need sort of the other fundamentals that we all enjoy, which is recreation and leisure and culture. So as we started to look at this site and looked at it in a flat plane, right, as a map, and just said, we recognize I'm pointing off to my right, that we have Playhouse Square kind of some distance away, but it comes down and hits Public Square. And starting to think about what that means for mobility and access as a landing point. And then also started to think about, well, we have the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse and Progressive Field kind of right off to our left there, and starting to think about that as a transition. And then maybe perhaps the area right next to the courthouse and moving into Cleveland there, and the workplace environments, and moving that maybe towards the Browns. And then, of course, looking at Irishtown Bend that Joe was just mentioning, that's being redeveloped now as a new recreation. And so how do we take these key components, these assets basically, and start to think about how will the design of this move that forward? And so if we identify those assets and then put under there, I think the framework that one thing that we're going to do that's different is really think about the mobility and access, right? Changing the idea of how fast can we get there to can we get everyone there and have a place, right? As we identify in the neighborhoods, how do you create different types of place that you want to be in and make those equitable and open to all? So next slide, please. So on the top, I hope these are images that you all recognize, but these are those assets. These are those places that you go in the downtown Cleveland. The national park is probably a bit out on the towpath, but these are places that you all know and experience on a hopefully a day-to-day basis. But it's the fundamentals that we're talking about here that we want to really explore and start to develop further. These are the opportunities we believe that we can start looking at as we move into a 22nd century. And that starts with public transit, right? Can we start to really think about the RTA that exists in Tower City now? And then think also about the surface, the buses, and start to make better connections and think about decreasing congestion, but getting more and more people to be able to come into downtown and create an epicenter that actually flows out or flows in from that moment. Strengthening that. I think the other thing is to really think about the commerce, the infrastructure of moving goods throughout the city. We recognize Whiskey Island as having a port and the idea of what it means for leveraging the lake. And how do you start to really think about where trucks are going to go and how that's going to work for the future? But then also thinking sort of more at the neighborhood scale of FedEx and Amazon. Where do those trucks go? How do they service and work through and not create barriers within the neighborhood? All while acknowledging the site topology, as Joe mentioned, going from 7 feet to 100 feet, we have a little constraint. But you can start to think that maybe we can really leverage that with the building and the developable parcels. So that takes us down to the water's edge, and we just start at our basic movement and think of 3,000 linear feet of bulkhead on a federal shipping channel. If we can start to make a change there and develop that, that should be our starting point to head back up to the top of the hill, which is the core, right? So the short of the core principle that you all were part of in the vision for the valley, we think there's a strong part that we can pull off of that. And next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, understanding that is a place that resonates. And that the towpath, the 11 miles of towpath that come in and make that connection in the city. So a great place of leisure and recreation of nature already has an infrastructure piece into downtown, but it sort of dissolves, right? And so if we go to the next slide, what we're thinking is, let's make this a destination. So redevelop that federal shipping channel, maintain transportation infrastructure, but now to really start to think that as public space, right? The idea that rebringing nature back into downtown as not just little segments or little zones, but really enhancing this to say, 10, 12 acres of public space on the water. And then using that as a moment to rethink Tower City. Next slide. Using that to rethink Tower City and how do we turn Tower City as it is in retail and commercial, but maybe it turns a little bit more into what I'm going to call infrastructure. And that as the RTA, we develop connections with the RTA and the buses, that now we have more public transportation coming through the building and more access than that could occur from the shore up to the core to the economic center. But with that, you can see we've identified here just that one obstacle that seems to be there is Huron Road, right? As you leave Tower City now, you come out and it's the nice arch right onto Huron Road, and then there's the barrier of getting down, right? You can see the water, you just can't touch it. So we've identified that as sort of a knuckle in establishing like the basic premise of the core to shore, shore to core, but really kind of Tower City is going to be so critical to how we move this forward and really kind of rethinking its relationship to the ground. Next slide. So with that, David, going to hand this over to you. I'll be here. Perfect. And I can point to anything you want.
Wonderful. Thank you, Russ. That's perfect. So let's move to the next slide. So on the basis of what you've just heard as the framework and all those challenges, we started to really imagine this incredible opportunity, really this riverfront as an incredible opportunity to reimagine a 21st century downtown and a relationship to a river. And we felt that to really achieve the agenda of creating an 18-hour, 15-minute city, mixed use, commercial, residential, entertainment, culture, sports, to really create a microcosm of what makes the city as another core on this waterfront, we felt that we really needed to learn the lessons of the city, but to change the scale, to start bringing down the scale, and to think about the lessons of the 21st century in terms of infrastructure building and construction, building new footprints that are much more sustainable, carbon neutral, and really start to talk about a dissolving grain that comes against this bend of the river, and the river creating a new waterfront that then dissolves the architecture of the city. Next. Oh, just before that, back. You just jumped two. It's fine, but go back. So essentially, this is the key diagram, really, from Public Square, you can see right at the top in the north, coming through Tower City, creating a sort of gateway that comes down to what we're calling the porch and connecting you directly to the waterfront. And then either side of that, left and right or east and west of that, creating another axis next to the courthouse that is really what we're calling the courtyard axis. And it's a new infrastructure that I'll show you in a second that connects to a park landscape that's a very wooded landscape that's about the flora and fauna of the region and the sort of joy that you get in the parks off the river. And then at the eastern end, what we're calling the canal bend, that joint where the river bends, naturally creating an area that starts to transition to entertainment, respite, sport, and a closer relationship to the water as the elevation changes and gets closer to the waterfront. And that we think really, and then creating the infrastructure, Eagle Avenue, a new access road that connects to Canal Road, changing the way in which Canal Road then operates with the waterfront, giving more space to be able to get pedestrians right to the waterfront, and really creating a new sort of network of systems that really support the ability for us to then build the density that we require to create that vibrancy that we all are seeking for the waterfront. Next. So this was then the sketch that it was just revealed earlier. If you go to the next one, next slide. Great. And so this was the sketch that was trying to talk about this new sort of densities, lower scale, more intimate. And this is sort of thinking about this, in 100 years' time. It's a sort of incredible interconnected network of residential, legal, legislative, commerce, culture, sports, a kind of microcosm of all the aspects of the city, hugging this beautiful river bend and creating a new infrastructure that's interconnected, reviving the old infrastructure to then become fantastic assets, additional assets for the city. And then how do we start? This is how we see it starting. These four sort of cuts that create these direct connections, but these three neighborhoods, the Court neighborhood, the Canal Bend, and the Cultural neighborhood. And each of these being, what I've talked about, the Court neighborhood being really connecting to this new park forest, this new sort of what I'm calling an arboretum of the sort of landscapes of the region being brought to a wonderful park that really will sort of show that diversity, be an amazing asset for education and just respite, creating wonderful residential community around that, and the existing communities that are using that neighborhood to also have that asset. The Canal Bend neighborhood, which is really looking at the porch, which is in sort of, that the porch really is Tower City, this new porosity, and I'll talk about that in a second, and the relationship to the water. Canal Bend and its, or the Culture Bend with its connection to water sports, entertainment, public arena, a way to really come very close to the waterfront and really enjoy the asset reimagined. Next. This is an overview of the site. We have a site approximately of about 35 acres. We've dedicated approximately 12 acres of that to the public waterfront and infrastructure. We're looking at a development of about 3.5 million square feet of development in the different scales and colors that you can see on the form, looking at approximately 2,000 residential units when we've built out what you're seeing in the diagrams, and really creating this vibrant mixed community that goes from commerce to residential to culture to sport, all around the asset of the reimagined riverfront. Next. Mobility is critical to that, to create this new density. We've really been thinking about the way in which the bus transit works and really wanting to robustly support that with new infrastructure in red that you can see in 4 and 5 with new bus terminals that allow for, collecting and not congesting public square and the areas around it, but also supporting that with the new sort of amount of people that will be coming in, making connections from those to the RT system, also strengthening the connections in the RT system in Tower City, and all of that really creating a fantastic opportunity to create the pedestrian and sort of quality of life that we want to start to open and reveal as you move from Huron and Cascade down to the waterfront, and really using Canal as a service road that really allows these developments to be serviced, but also then calming it and creating a friendly environment, which can then allow for the public assets, the landscapes to then really bring you right to the waterfront. Next. At the heart of that is really, something that is unavoidable and something that is critical in any development. I'm so happy that we can really think absolutely critically about sustainability in this development. For me, one of the exciting things was this moment, this parcel of land is south-facing, east-west, sunrise to sunset. Fantastic opportunity that allows for us to create an incredible biophilic gem, the diversity and the ecology that the planet offers, that this world offers, and the ability to create incredible gardens and walkways and boardwalks that are really enjoying the asset of being south-facing, enjoying the warm sun, even in the winter months. And with that, we want to also make an architecture that is sensitive and understands the important nature of the asset that we'll be making here, and to create really carbon neutral, as close to carbon neutral architecture as possible, using the latest advances in timber technology and and concrete reduction, concrete sort of CO2 reduced concrete, and really also thinking about energy and sort of smart energy coming to the site, the electric system, charging systems being part of the ecology, and all of that working off the sustenance of the water, really creating cooling currents and uplifts and the enhanced biophilic environment that will create a fantastic environment for all. Next. Let's look at the sections, and we'll start from the west. So this is sort of this is looking from the west and thinking about very much the federal courthouse as the building, sort of the beige building behind us, and the state office building is to the left. And how we're looking at working with the existing car park is that we're creating a series of what I'm calling cascading terraces that go down, that are connected by stairs and ramps and walkways and elevators that bring you down, right down to the elevation of the waterfront, the 16 foot above water level. These stairs are not just about steps, but they're really destinations. They're little mini plazas, little pocket urban spaces that really are designed as this, almost like a sort of gentle hill that rises with landscape that allows you to kind of take your time and meander down, but always to get the fantastic sight line and always to enjoy the south-facing sun that will come right through. Next. Let's look at one of the pocket parks. This is a kind of moment where between the developments, one of the things that we were very excited about because it's south-facing is that we can then also, if we're not creating sort of physical connections, we can create these wonderful sort of hill terraces with landscape. Because we have the south-facing sun, we can grow so much plant life and ecology, and we really think we can create these beautiful garden walls that really will cascade and be the sort of the shield to the parking structure, but also create a solar reflector to really amplify these pocket parks that we're creating between the developments that'll become intimate parks for residents and for the community that is shielded from prevailing winds, but also are protected and really sort of nurtured with the way in which we create the biophilic environment, the sort of natural environment that are going to be in these pocket parks. Next. And then really the key section that really takes us from opens the square, the core to shore, as being said, and really going through Tower City. And really Tower City for us is really the new town square. It is really to reimagine Tower City, not just as a hermetic shopping mall anymore, but as a real town square that brings the community from all around into the heart of what we're calling the porch that connects you from the public square right down to the riverfront. And we see that as a kind of new glazed infrastructure, very low carbon footprint architecture made out of timber is how we're thinking about it at the moment. And it creates a sort of inside-outside space that allows us to plant trees and create a really powerful linear connection to public square and right down to the waterfront. So really from public square, you're able to come through the existing Tower City and connect to this newly remade image of Tower City that cascades you gently down to the waterfront and brings you right to the water's edge. Next. The success of that, so if you go to the next image, success of that really requires us to really take away the perception that you're going underground as you're going through the sections and cutting through to the waterfront. And one of those moves is at Huron, what we're calling the creation of what we're calling Huron Plaza, and that's really to make a cut on Huron that creates a new urban plaza, so that when you are coming through, you have this moment where you see the sky and you see the sun and you see light, and you get also the axes, the fantastic view to see the bridges and the waterfront, and you really are then sort of connected with this new, what I'm calling town square public infrastructure that is really about these terraces, these plazas with plant life that cascade you and lead you. As it were, the river and its sort of offering of nature streams right through this public infrastructure, connecting you to the formal gardens of public square. So this green, new public realm is then being established. Next. This is looking at the other pocket park, same idea, the reflecting sort of hillside landscape wall, the green walls that then create these beautiful, intimate park spaces. But then this is also giving you an image of how the waterfront boardwalk works, creating this space away from canal and creating a whole infrastructure along the waterfront. And all this is set back from the federal sort of infrastructure that's in the water. So we're not disturbing that. We're really working within the confines of that, so that we're really creating this new world within the confines of the infrastructure that we find ourselves in. Next. And really, Canal Bend, right at the east, that moment when the elevations change, where the infrastructure of the car parks and the rail systems go ducking under the city, and you start to reveal the contours of the landscape. You're seeing the power stations, et cetera. We're seeing that moment as a great moment to create another set of cascading stairs that come down to the waterfront, connecting that to entertainment, to the ability to create sports. The landscape becomes much more level and much more generous to be able to create areas of recreation and respite. Kayaking, staging points could be there. And really at the bend, seeing the opportunity of that elevation change to create a natural amphitheater, a cascade to the water, allowing citizens to be able to touch the river at that point, and really creating a fantastic natural amphitheater at that point, which could really be a real asset for the city. Next. Let's now look at some of the images of these particular qualities that I've been talking about, starting back in the west near the federal courthouse. This idea of this wonderful park that is this that has a kind of forest-like quality by having an arboretum of different species of the region that are really celebrated here with lawns and paths, really creating a space that can be fantastic for education, but also for intimacy and well-being, and creating a very rich environment that is sort of surrounded by residential architecture, as well as some of the sort of legislative architecture that's existing at the moment. Next. Let's look at another image, really coming round the sort of boardwalk at the higher elevations, a more protected relationship to the water, looking at how we can think about water and fountains and children's play. This is a view looking towards the new sort of remade, what we're calling porch. This is the Tower City porch infrastructure that comes right to the waterfront and cascades you right to the water. Next. And this is a kind of wonderful moment from what we're calling Huron Plaza. This is that moment where we create that opening as you come through from the main square, that you get this wonderful vantage point and you look out to Eagle Avenue Bridge, the kind of really the icon of the industrial era. You know, maybe one day that's refurbished and is a fantastic looking point back. But the idea that that infrastructure also helps us sort of reconnect and layer our history with this new porch that creates a kind of wonderful, seamless system about imagining this downtown area, which was an industrial infrastructure, now into a public asset that really is about creating another fantastic jewel for the city and its citizens. Next. And then lastly, by the waterfront, really at that low elevation, and looking at the sort of architecture. You know, the buildings that you're seeing are just quick sort of imaginings of, how we see a kind of carbon architecture, low footprint architecture, sensitive human scaled architecture with porosity on the ground floor. It's not about proposals yet. It's really about thinking about that. And then really what we're trying to get absolutely right is the way in which landscape and water relationships really create these fantastic pockets that allow people to just come and enjoy this fantastic asset of their city, and to have that be a fantastic neighborhood for everyone. Next. And this is at the bend. This is looking at that great opportunity of the arena, that knuckle, creating that amphitheater that cascades right into the water. Really a fantastic moment for anyone to be able to get right next to the river, seeing the boats and detour fishing or whatever could happen at that point. And looking back at, the sort of an idea of the sort of lower architecture, the build out of the different offerings of residential, office, commerce, et cetera, that can be built along the waterfront to support it. Let's look at a night view, really looking at sort of some of the wonderful traditions of, kayaking with night lights, and really this becoming really a fantastic, not just a sort of daytime place, but an 18-hour city that really has a vibrant evening life as well as a day life, and really becoming a real asset for the community. Again, looking at it in different weather, we wanted to show that this is not just about summer. We understand the seasons in the city next. And looking at a sort of winter's day with this fantastic ability to be able to walk on the south-facing waterfront, enjoying the sun when it peeks through the clouds, and having this fantastic boardwalk with nature and water, and seeing this new sort of imagined public town square, the porch, sort of being part of the new way in which the city kind of connects with its asset. And then last image, an overview, really looking at imagining this environment now in the future, and thinking about the fantastic asset that this will be. We hope not just for the 21st century, but well into the 22nd century, really establishing the principles that have been discussed earlier about really creating something that really is a true asset for the Clevelanders and for everyone in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
We'll take questions in a moment. I'd love for the council president, perhaps, if you could say a few words.
Well, good morning. Wow, wasn't that fantastic? I first want to acknowledge a couple of my colleagues that are here today. The first, I want to acknowledge my leadership team that is here. The downtown council person himself, majority leader and council person for Ward 3, Kerry McCormick, if he could please stand. I also have the majority whip for Cleveland City Council, and she is the first Latina elected to Cleveland City Council, Jasmine Santana, if she could please stand. And then I also have the chair, part of my leadership team, the chair of the DPS, Development Planning and Sustainability, Anthony Harrison, if he could please stand. And I do want to acknowledge my favorite go-to public servant from Columbus that is here today, former Senator, now Representative Tom Patton, if he could please stand. Tom is our go-to guy in Columbus, so I always enjoy him. I want to commend, first of all, Kofi and his team. They have been very proactive in engaging Cleveland City Council on this project, and that's important because it really builds trust in council as well as the communities that we represent. I'm excited to have someone as nationally renowned as Sir David Adjaye to develop a signature project on our Crooked River. I'm all in on this Bedrock project, basically because it advances the development of our riverfront, and it starts right here with Tower City and the Cuyahoga Riverfront. Bedrock's announcement today is more commitment to the city of Cleveland, besides having the best team in the NBA, in the Cleveland Cavaliers, showing that you give that a round of applause. And we know that we have a valuable resource in Lake Erie, but we also know how critical and how crucial our riverfront is. It's critical for our waterways to improve our economic health, but it also is critical for our residents all across the region to have this 15-minute waterfront neighborhood and become an 18-hour city. I'll figure out what we'll do with the other 6, Mayor, at some other time. But that begins right here with Bedrock developing Tower City and Cuyahoga County and Cuyahoga River front the right way. I don't want to go into details, but one of the things that has been exciting about this is that Kofi and his team and Deb and others and Nadia have done a great job of really helping sell this to the community in a proactive way. And one of the things that they have already begun embracing and talking about is how we can actually make sure that the entire community of the city of Cleveland benefits from this project, so that we start out the right way, that this doesn't become a downtown versus the neighborhood, but but that this becomes an inclusive project that everyone in the city of Cleveland, and quite frankly, the region and Ohio, will get a chance to enjoy, and everyone will feel that they get a great return on their investment. So I really appreciate all that you have done and all the advice you have given us on making sure we do this the right way. My conversations with the Bedrock leadership have been phenomenal. Council is really, really bought in. I also see that I want to recognize Senator Matt Dolan, if he could please stand. I know that he's here. I can't tell you how excited we are for the communities that we represent, that we'll have a transformational project, and that Sir David Adjaye will be able to have his signature imprint right here in the city of Cleveland, in one of the greatest cities in the United States of America and definitely in the world. So thank you so much, and City Council is ready to work with you guys to make this a reality. Have a great day.
Well, thank you so much. Great words. So, look, I know pushing up against that, I know you may have a few questions, but I just want to point out that as you've seen in this, we are really excited. We're really excited because we know that we will be able to deliver a world-class mixed-use riverfront to this wonderful city. And we know that it also takes a great partnership with the city, with the mayor, and certainly with the city council. And so we look forward, we're ready to engage in those conversations that will bring the civic leaders and the community leaders into the tent so we can improve and refine and further define this project. It's so critical for us. And most people, we think, well, what's next? Well, we're going to have more conversations, and more presentations. We're going to break this down into even smaller bits so we can truly understand the engineering and around the infrastructure, have more conversations with Ms. Birdsong and her team around how to deal with the transit and mobility opportunities and challenges. And that's what we're going to spend our time on. But we hope that sometime within the next 6 to 8 months, we'll be able to announce a breakthrough development agreement with the city that not only determines how we will move forward with respect to our spending, but also how the public partnership will also provide some significant public financing to assist us in developing this really phenomenal public infrastructure. So with that, I'm open to take some questions for a few minutes. Yes, sir. There's a mic coming up.
Hi, Kofi. John Kosick from Channel 5. Is there an overall price tag that you'd be looking at for something like this? And over how long of a period of time would you expect this to come to be?
Sure, there is. As we have currently defined this project, it's probably about a $3.5 billion project. As we're looking at timeframes, clearly there are a number of factors, market, et cetera, but we probably think 15 to 20 years to get this really set right. But with all master plans, you have to set the place. You have to set the place, you have to put the infrastructure in, you have to put the parks in. You have to create a place that people say, oh, I want to be there. When people determine that they want to be there, then you can frankly build those buildings that people want to live there and perhaps want to work there. And so that's a process. And the speed with which we develop that first part of setting the place, frankly, determines a great deal on our ability to harness that public financing. Any other questions? No? Well, that's great. I got it easy. Oh, yes. Is there an opportunity, just to repeat the question, is there an opportunity to heat some of those stairways and plazas to get down to the riverfront? Well, certainly if you come through Tower City from Public Square, it should be pretty warm. But no, not to be frivolous. No, we absolutely are looking at ways to make sure that this may be one of the few riverfronts in the world that is all seasons. And we recognize that that means you have to pay attention to the winter conditions. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all very, very much. I look forward to further engagement with you. Thank you. Thank you.